Welcome back as we finish up chapter 12 of Leviticus in Teaching Through the Bible. We started last time talking about chapter 12. It's only 8 verses, but we still didn't get through all of it last time because there's some difficult stuff here. Talking about childbirth, talking about how that makes a woman unclean, how she becomes clean again, and then how she gives a sin offering as part of that. Why is she giving a sin offering as part of her becoming clean again from her flow of blood in childbirth? So we looked at the possibility that there's an imperfection, that this is not how things should be, and that perhaps being unclean has to do with imperfection. Sin is certainly a type of imperfection, but are those necessarily the same thing? Maybe not. Maybe there's overlap in the sense that they both are tied to an imperfection, but it's not the exact same. But there is a sin offering. It's called a sin offering. Does it have to do actually with sin? Is this uncleanness, and perhaps uncleanness in general, sin? That sets such a higher bar, such a higher standard than what we are used to thinking about, and probably what we really want to admit, if that would be the case. But let's go ahead and look at the argument for that and what that could be pointing to, what that could look like, and then we will move on from there. We'll wrap it up, finish up chapter 12. So we have sin. Is it A or B? Either from the world or the self. Is it that now birth would not have been this way in a perfect world? Birth and raising children, that all became so hard because of sin. We see that in Genesis chapter 3. So perhaps all this blood coming out, this imperfection being not part of the original design. Is it that this is something that comes as a result not of the woman sinning, but Adam's sin? The fact that there is sin in the world, this sin offering potentially being a sacrifice that's reminding of just the sin in the world. Or is it that it's her sin? And in that case, when we're talking about sin, a lot of times we want to think of it as something that's we're doing it intentionally, like we're choosing to do this bad thing. Now, I think it's pretty clear throughout the Bible. We've already seen in earlier chapters here that you give sacrifices for unintentional sin. So maybe you don't know something's a sin and then you do it. I think we'll talk about Sabbath later when we get to Deuteronomy and look at the 10 Commandments when we get there. But some people will say, hey, you can't go out to eat on Sunday, and some people say it's fine. Well, if the people that say it's not okay are right, then the people who think it's fine and are eating out, well, they are sinning in that case, if that's how it is. But they don't know they are. But they still are sinning by doing it, regardless. So you can definitely have unintentional sin, but this is a little bit more than that, isn't it? This is not just like an unintentional thing. This is something you can't control. This is something that you don't have control over this happening. This is not something that you did not know. You chose to do it and just didn't know that it was a bad thing to do. And certainly having kids is not bad in and of itself. This is the first command God gives us. But the idea that we can't help it, it might be sinning. First of all, as we think of this last category of it, one important thing to notice is just remember, we're in the New Testament era. This is a part of the ceremonial law. This is not moral law. This is ceremonial law. This does not look the same in our current day. So whatever answer we come up with, whichever one of those ways we go, regardless, this is not something, it's not a sin to have this bleeding right now. Even if you end up on that last possible option, that's still not what it is now. This doesn't look the same in the New Testament era. But God has a standard, right? And sometimes we think that standard is here. And then the more we learn, the more we realize the standard's bigger. And maybe this is part of how bigger the standard is. That it doesn't matter that it's irrelevant, the fact that we can't do anything about it. It's still short of perfection. It's still sin. He says it's not how things should be, and so even if it's not like our fault, it's still sin. That's possible. Again, this is under this last view that we're talking. There's several different ways that this could be interpreted, but on this last one, we're just seeing that God's standard is even higher than we thought, and even if that is not the case in this particular instance, I think it's probably fair to say that for most of us, like, God's standard's higher than we usually think. The more we read the Bible, the more we do realize God's standard is bigger. It's bigger the more we realize God's standard is bigger. We also can realize we are worse and worse and worse. We are worse than we thought we were. And here's the amazing thing about the gospel. When we think God's standard's kind of high and we think we're not great, Jesus is what fills that gap, right? But that's still true no matter how high his bar is and no matter how bad we are. The more we realize how high of a bar God has, that doesn't mean that we need to do more to get there. And the more we realize how bad we are, we don't need to do more to make up for that. Jesus is still the one who fills it all. The more we realize how great God is and how bad we are, the more we realize how amazing what Jesus did in dying for us is. And that right there, that's the gospel. Knowing that, seeing the point right here. So you have these different views of what this could be, different interpretations. And even if you take what people are going to call the most extreme interpretation, you're still getting this message. That Jesus covers no matter how far we fall, no matter how high his bar is, no matter how impossible it looks. His bar is impossible no matter what. Sometimes it's just more clear to us that it is impossible. So if we understand sin and uncleanness to be the same, or to have this connection with each other, whether it's us specifically, or just sin in the world, we get the same result, that Jesus took care of it, that Jesus covers all that sin. I think really maybe the only people who have to really wrestle with exactly which one of these it is, the only people this makes, I guess, the biggest difference to is going to be Roman Catholics, as far as how to interpret chapter 12. Because for Christians, we look at this and say, all right, well, either we say this, it's not sin, it's being unclean, but that's not a sinful thing, or we see that, it is sin, but it's talking about just sin in the world, or we see that this is actually sinful for them because of their imperfection, and so they definitely, just like us, they needed Jesus and needed him as much as we do in the Old Testament. Either way, whatever the case, we can say Jesus covers it, and like the practical implication isn't really any different. It's still something that was a ceremonial law, something that now we see in the New Testament has been fulfilled. But for Roman Catholics, something particular about this sacrifice, it's actually used. We see this in the book of Luke. Mary gives this sacrifice after Jesus is born. Mary gives a sin offering. Now, that doesn't fit with Roman Catholic belief because Roman Catholics say that Mary was sinless, that she was perfect. So if this is showing either sin or perhaps even just showing a lack of perfection, and then Mary is acknowledging this lack of perfection in her by giving this offering. So that's interesting because now Jesus, it says he fulfilled all the law, but it doesn't ever say he gave a sacrifice. There's many things about the law that you have to follow, that Jesus would have been following, but the sacrificial system, he didn't have to because it's for when you fall short on something, and he did not fall short on anything. But yet Mary is giving this sacrifice. So that is something, if you're Roman Catholic, to really look hard at Leviticus chapter 12. Look hard at Luke, early in the gospel, when Mary gives that sacrifice. That's something that in you're particularly Roman Catholic, you really need to wrestle with right there is what's going on here? What is that implication for Mary? Who, by the way, side note, Mary, in the Greek is Miriam, so same name as Moses' sister. So that's just side note. It's kind of cool. Just throwing that out there. But that's going to be the end of us talking about chapter 12. Few verses, but a lot to talk about. So we'll start next time with chapter 13 in Leviticus. Chapter 13 being all these diseases, skin diseases and discharges and other gross stuff. But and that's a long one. It's 59 verses. It's a lot. And then you have how to make clean these different diseases, how to handle that, not just for people, but for mold and mildew in houses and things like that. And as I said, the bodily discharges, that's going to be the next chapter there. So that's all of that's coming in the next 3 chapters. So see you back on the next videos for how all that points us to Jesus. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.